Alright, hello everybody. Welcome to our next time period here. We're going to take a look at women and family and working life from 1921 to 1937. Our desired result is what was life like for women at work and at school. And our objectives and standards to understand the daily and working lives of women from 1921 to 1937 and to analyze the difficulties women faced during the period. Just take a moment there to look over the standards. So the roaring 1920s, following World War I, many women experienced a rise in the standard of living and more freedom. However, life could be difficult for some women, especially those who were poor. Most American girls had received at least a basic high school education by the 1920s, and young women were expected to work until they were married. We also see a rapid growth of cities and businesses that opened new opportunities to women, and many women began to earn more money on their own, which they could spend on clothing and entertainment. That plays into our next slide here of the excitement of flappers and fun. Many young single women of the 1920s wore short skirts, had haircuts in bobs or shorter haircuts, and stayed up late partying. They were commonly nicknamed flappers or it girls after a movie similar to the name. And even though these women were out having a good time and having fun, many older Americans were shocked at their behavior and their dress. But many who consider themselves flappers had relaxed attitudes about life, enjoying dancing and listening to jazz music as well. New ways of living. Attitudes about marriage also began to change. We begin to see young women starting careers or jobs and waiting until later to marry, and some women actually decided to make the decision to stay single in general. Divorce was still common in the United States, but it was very rare, and many women had fun and freedom, but others had busy lives at home. Cooking, cleaning, and laundry were still seen, not seemed, as daily tasks of women. However, many appliances began to help women, such as washing machines, vacuum cleaners, and electric irons, which you can all see here. This is an ad from the 1920s. You can see it has the vacuum cleaner, the waffle iron, the bread maker, the coffee percolator, the electric washer. So again, all these new inventions and appliances are definitely going to make a lot of those daily chores and tasks less time consuming. So caring for children. We learned about Margaret Sanger already, and she had established the first American birth control conference in New York City, New York in 1921. It helped found the American Birth Control League to help educate the public on birth control clinics. Other steps were also taken to support children as well. 1921, the U.S. Children's Bureau was founded to support children and keep them healthy and safe. Also, 1921, the Shepherd-Towner Maternity and Infancy Protection Act was passed. This provided funding to state agencies to set up public clinics offering prenatal and early childhood care. Now, the funding did stop in 1929 because of the Great Depression, but other programs will be started up again in 1935 under the New Deal. In 1925, Ethel Dench Puffer Howes founded the Institute for the Coordination of Women's Interests at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. And this offered a variety of services such as daycare for such as daycare for women, for children who were working, and married women as well. So problems in poor communities. Although many women lived comfortable lives during the 1920s, there were others that faced difficulty as well. For example, in many American cities, there were run-down slums where families lived in crowded or dirty conditions. Sometimes women had multiple children who they had to care for, and unfortunately many of them had to deal with abusive or drunk husbands. However, thanks to the work of progressive reformers and women, different organizations had been established to help support poor women so they weren't really facing these challenges alone. Banning alcohol. Many saw the problems of society as a result of drinking and alcohol, and eventually the temperance movement, which we've talked about before, was successful at getting a ban on alcohol passed by the U.S. Congress in 1920 under the Prohibition Act. Bars and breweries were shut down across the United States, but people still found a way to find alcohol. For example, there were bootleggers and smugglers, which could include women at times, who made or transported alcohol to American cities. Now, despite the efforts to solve the problems of society, Prohibition created more crime, poverty, and violence. People stole more, people were sneaking alcohol, people were robbing banks and other places for money. So Prohibition really didn't do what it was supposed to do. So in December of 1933, the Prohibition Act was repealed and alcohol became legal again. So sad and struggling times. In 1929, the U.S. stock market crashed and set off what became known as the Great Depression. Now, many people lost their jobs, their homes, and sometimes their families or their lives. To help those in need, many organizations such as the YWCA, or the Young Women's Christian Association, tried to provide food and shelter. In the early 1930s, it was estimated that there were 145,000 homeless women in America, and many women lived in boxcar trains or other poor conditions. Crime and violence were also widespread across the country. I don't know if you've heard of this couple before, but Bonnie and Clyde were a young couple that very famously known for robbing banks and killing people in the 1930s. They were both actually killed together themselves. But again, they're not the only example of many famous criminals that come about in the 1930s due to the struggles of the Great Depression. So, lives of working women. The 1920s, we see a rise in working women outside the home. But while some advances for working women happened, many women lost their jobs or had pay cuts during the Great Depression. Now, some women still did have some success despite economic difficulties. During the Great Depression, women were paid less than men. Some worked very long hours, which forced mothers to be away from their children. Women and labor unions sometimes went on strike for better pay or shorter working hours. And programs under the New Deal allowed some women to gain new jobs, but some also lost theirs as a result of it. Alright, so our closure. What was life like for women at work and home during the 1920s and during the 1930s, okay? So have a great rest of your day or night, and I will talk to you soon.